Hi everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Tea with the Druid 25, and this actually is the silver jubilee of Tea with the Druid. My name is Eimear Burke. I am a Druid and a storyteller, a member of OBOD, and Philip has asked me to talk to you or to host this session this evening. So this is my first time on live Facebook, so forgive me, I'm a little bit nervous. So Philip recently spoke about non-compliant Druids who chose to drink beer or coffee at this session rather than tea. And let me assure you, I am complying. I am drinking tea. However, I will be telling a story later rather than leading a meditation. So I just want to see where people are coming from today. Okay, we have, somebody coming from chilly New Zealand. It's absolutely lovely here in Ireland. Hi from Somerset, Yorkshire, and somebody from the better side of the Irish border, Yorkshire, Australia. Hi, Chris, and Canada. Oh my goodness, this amazes me how far away people are and yet can come together on a medium like this. And I suppose, well, listen to me, I don't see you, but you see me, and you can see how big this community is. So anyway, let's start. I was watching a TED Talk recently by Ingrid Fattel-Lee entitled Where Joy Hides and Where to Find It. And I was intrigued by this. And she asks some interesting questions. For example, where does joy come from? How do things give us joy? And she made an interesting point about the universality of joy, or that the experiences that bring us joy, these experiences that tend to be shared generally by humanity. Now, she described joy as these momentary experiences of positive emotion. Unlike happiness, which may be an ongoing feeling of well-being, these are peak experiences of positive emotion. And that joy comes from through the senses. So how we see, feel, hear, taste, smell, and those senses, how we experience the natural world, the physical world. And of course, as Druids, our connection with the natural world is very, very important. And it's through this connection that we find joy, and that we have a drive towards joy, or a drive towards life. And included in the natural world is our connections and relationships with each other. So I was reflecting on what is it that brings me joy. And luckily I can say that the list is very long. And I was out in my garden earlier this evening, just noticing what was around me. And the roses are just beginning to come into flower, and their perfume is just exquisite. And roses generally give me joy. Watching a wren build its nest a few weeks ago just outside my garden room, or seeing my adolescents, children who smile at me, which isn't very often. So when they do, it's a wonderful treat. And I love tango. I took up Argentine tango last October, and it really, really brings me, when it's working, it brings me joy. So I'd like to know, what is it that brings you joy? If anyone could share those. Hi, I see Mervyn is there, somebody from Brussels, Violetta. I think we have jammed. So often what brings us joy are like rainbows, sunsets, babies, our pets. For me, sometimes it's the first, when the buds just come in and the leaves just come into being, catching the smell of gorse, the smell of the coconut. So science tells us that we have actually 3 times more positive experiences than negative. How often we tend to focus more on negative, and they give two suggestions. So 2 suggested reasons for this. One is a negativity bias, that this is our innate tendency to give more weight to the negative. Another suggestion is that of habituation, that as we receive boosts of joy from new positive experiences, over time we get used to them. And so they no longer have the same effect. And for me, I think we have so many distractions from real positive experiences. And I mean simple experiences, like watching a sunset that I mentioned earlier. Hi, Eva, I just see you've just joined, and somebody from Milton Keynes, somebody from New York, Enfield. Is that Enfield, Ireland? Wow. Germany. You're all very, very welcome. So when I'm talking about a simple experience of watching a sunset, that so often in these days of technology, instead of actually experiencing the sunset, watching it and actually feeling what it's like to be there, we're busy photographing it and posting it on Facebook. And so often such posting, etc., on Facebook, or such social media steals our time and steals our energy away from real experiences, from real contact with people and maybe real experiences with joy. Now, having said that, I'm aware that I'm on Facebook now talking to you and talking to people from all over the world who are connected on this forum through a love of Druidry, through a need for connection with like-minded people. So this is a very good use of feedback. So I'm wondering, what is it that what brings people joy? I would be interested in hearing what you have to say. Tennessee, I see that. Ballina, Killaloo. California. You're all very, very welcome. So, research on joy is now showing that discussing positive experiences with others, obviously those that care and who are willing to listen, leads to heightened heightened well-being and increased overall satisfaction with life. I see people have friends, sunny days, good books, watching birds and plants in my yard, painting and walking in the forest, the smell of thunder, rain, lilac. Playing or listening brings me joy. Singing the birds, the robin who's singing in the tree behind our house every day. Oh, and walking in the rain. Beautiful. Being in the river, singing. My grandbabies, that's beautiful. So, like I said, research shows that when you're actually sharing these experiences, it brings you more, actually increases your well-being and your sense of joy. And that, I suppose, what's important, even though we're sharing them right now, is to share them with face-to-face contact. Family, I see joy, too many to mention. My dogs, my husband, my daughters. Rory from Yorkshire. I'm so happy to have found OBOD and I'm looking forward to starting the course shortly. Very welcome, Rory. And Wonderful, wonderful. So, having spoken about joy, I'm now going to tell you a story that storytelling is another thing that gives me joy. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to share in this joy. So a long time ago, in the land of Ireland, there was a once famous and very wise king called Cormac of Macart, and he was the High King of Ireland, and he lived in Tara. And the reign of King Cormac was known far and wide to be a very healthy reign. He was a wise and just king. He maintained sovereignty with the land, which meant that at the time there were no wars. The cows were producing plentiful supplies of milk. The fields were full of crops. All was well in the island of Ireland at that time. And Cormac had a beautiful wife, a very intelligent wife, who was very much his partner and his equal, as they shared, was she behind the scenes in those days. He couldn't have been king without her. He sought her counsel on so many issues. And she was his best friend and his lover, and brought him great joy. And he had a daughter, Alva, who was not only beautiful, but very bright, intelligent, and filled his days with joy and laughter. And his son, Corbra, a fine, handsome young man, who he had hoped would one day be king. So one day, Cormac was looking out over the ramparts in Tara, and it was a bright, sunny day, very like the one we had today here in Ireland, few and far between in these days. And he was thinking and reflecting on all that was going on in his life, and he was aware of all these good things, and yet there was some void, there was something missing. He was feeling bored and confused. I see Chris Hughes likes poetry, yes, music. He was bored with life. Everything seemed to be just too good. And then suddenly he heard this sound. And as he heard the sound, this peace and joy and calm, tranquility just came within his heart. He began to smile to himself. Oh, I wonder where that sound came from. And he began to look around. Where could it possibly be? And then he saw coming across the lawn a tall young man with long golden curls, wearing what looked like a very expensive cloak, the color of purple, with silver stars shimmering in the sunlight. And this man held a silver branch in his hand. And as Cormac saw that, he said to himself, what I wouldn't give to have that branch. And the man came towards him, and Cormac said, welcome, young man, welcome to Tara. And the young man said, welcome. Greetings to you, King Cormac, Cormac of Ireland. My name is Manannán Mac Lir. Cormac couldn't keep his eyes off the silver branch, and he said, that is a very interesting looking branch you have. And Manannán said, well, would you like it? And Cormac said, yes, yes, yes. And he took the branch up in his hand. And he said, what do you want for it? Without thinking, anything you want, you can have. I mean, Cormac was a very wealthy man. He thought he could afford it all. So, slowly, Manannán said, I just want 3 things. Yes, yes, anything you want, said Cormac, so intrigued and enthralled he was with this branch. I'll return for my first payment in a year and a day. And with that, he disappeared. So Cormac went in to the great hall to tell everybody about his experience with Manannán and this wonderful branch. And he played the branch were so pleased, the joy and laughter and peace that came into their hearts. And they lived happily like that for a year and a day. And again, Cormac was standing on the ramparts, and who did he see coming across the lawn? Only Manannán. And it was only at that point that he realized, uh-oh, he's coming for his payment. Anyway, never mind. Maybe I was a bit reckless, but I'm a wealthy man. I'm sure I can afford to give him what it is he wants. So he said, welcome to Tara, Manannán. And Manannán said, thank you, King Cormac. Greetings to you, and I have come for my first payment. Sure, just name it. Somebody from Tipperary here. Well done. And he said, I've come for your daughter, Alva. And Cormac said, you can't be serious. Alva, my daughter. You cannot take my daughter. She gives me the joy that I have when I see a rainbow just after a rain shower. No, you can't take her. Please, I will give you 50 of my best men. You can have 40 of my horses. You can have 100 of my best cattle. Please do not take my daughter. And Manannán looked him straight in the eye and he said, you agreed, and I will have her. And he walked into the great hall, and he came out a few moments later, taking Alva by the hand, who didn't seem to be resisting. And Cormac called after him, what am I going to do about my daughter, without my daughter? And Manannán looked at him and said, well, you have the silver branch. So Cormac ran back into the great hall and told everybody what had happened, and the weeping and the wailing and the conrawning, and oh, Alachona, what are we going to do? And then he remembered the silver branch. And with that, peace and joy and harmony reigned, and all their woes and sorrow were forgotten. And so it was like that for another year and a day. And then Manannán came back to Tara, and Cormac was on his usual spot. And this time he had a pit in his stomach, wondering what he would take this time. So needless to say, his welcome wasn't so effusive. It was, well, welcome, Manannán, welcome to Tara. And he says, greetings to you, King Cormac. How are you on this fine day? And I've come for my second payment. Okay. And then he was stunned when Manannán asked for his son, Carbra. He said, you cannot be serious. You are taking my son. That boy gives me so much joy. Just like the joy I feel when I see the water cascading down a waterfall. Surely you cannot take my son. Listen, I will give you half of my army. I'll give you my full wine cellar. I will give you all the crops that are in my barns. Do not take my son. And Manannán said, you agreed, and I will have him. And he went into the great hall, and he came out a few months later with Carbra by the hand. And needless to say, Cormac was devastated. And he went back into the great hall and told everybody what had happened. And again, they started weeping and wailing. And he remembered the silver branch. And peace and harmony and joy, forgetfulness reigned once again for another year and a day. And again, Manannán came back, and it was with great foreboding that Cormac, as he watched him come across the lawn. Greetings, Manannán. I know you've come for your third payment. What is it? I've come for your wife. You cannot be serious. You cannot take Eithne. She is my life. She gives me joy. She is like the rising sun. You cannot take her from me. You have taken my son. You have taken my daughter. Surely you cannot take my wife. You agreed, he said, and I am taking her. He went into the great hall, and he came out a few moments later, taking Eithne by the hand. And off they went. Again, Cormac was devastated, and he ran into the great hall and told everybody, and began to weep and wail. And somebody said, where's the silver branch? And he said, this time, I'm not going to use it. Nothing is worth the loss of my son, my daughter, my wife. And he carefully took the silver branch in his hand and wrapped it up and headed straight off in pursuit of Manannán and Eithne, and he could see them in the distance. And for 3 days and 3 nights he crossed rivers and valleys and hills and through forests until he came to the edge of the sea. And he could see ahead of him where Manannán and Eithne were in a corrigal heading off towards the Western Isles. And there was a corrigal luckily on the beach, and he hopped in himself, carefully taking the branch with him and making sure it didn't make any sound. And as he was going along the ocean, he managed to notice strange things, different islands, one an island of salmon, another island of black and white horses. And one he nearly lost his life in when he passed the island of women and they were throwing balls of wool at him, hoping to catch him. But he was so focused on getting his family back, nothing could deter him. And he could hear beautifully coloured birds flying overhead, singing with the voices of humans. And he knew he had arrived at Tir na Nog, in the other world. And eventually he saw land ahead. And he could see in the distance Manannán and Eithne getting out of the boat and heading off along a pathway. And eventually he arrived at the shore, and he got out and he pulled his corrigal up onto the beach. He began to follow the pathway. And on the way, he came across more strange sights. He saw fairy men thatching a longhouse with the feathers of white birds. And he noticed that as soon as the roof was thatched, a great wind would come and blow the feathers all over the place. And the fairy men would go gathering up the feathers. And then they'd get up on the roof again and rethatch. And as soon as they were finished, a wind would blow again and would blow the feathers away, and the men would start gathering the feathers and up again, and this went on. And he suddenly had to shake himself. He was getting mesmerized. This is a distraction. I need to move on. I need to find my family. And the next he moved on along the path until he came across a youth chopping wood frantically and filling a hungry fire. But as soon as the logs would go into the fire, it would just consume them immediately. He'd go back and he'd chop more wood and he'd throw them into the fire. And this went on and on. And again, Cormac had to extricate himself from this and not be so distracted and head off. And then he came to a well. And he knew this was an enchanted well. There were 5 streams leading from the well. And around the well were 9 hazel trees. And he watched as the nuts dropped from the trees into the well. And he saw salmon coming up these 5 streams, taking the nuts. He said, the well of Shikash. Some of you know it as Cunla's well, or Nectan's well. And he saw beside the well a 4-sided cup. He heard a voice inside him saying, "Drink of me." So he dipped the cup into the well and he drank of the water. And as he did, the sense of well-being, real well-being, came over him. He felt himself for the first time in his life standing into his own power. And he began to remember all that he had forgotten and realized all that he had known. And knowing when not to talk too much or talk too little, to give too much or to give too little. And began to realize what real kingship was. And when he'd finished drinking, he put down the cup and he headed off along the path until he came to a large palisade. And as he reached there, a doorway opened and he entered into a large courtyard. And sitting in this courtyard were what appeared to be a king or a queen, a god or a goddess. And the woman said to him, "Greetings and welcome, King Cormac, Cormac, High King of Ireland. Welcome to Tir na Nog, the land of promise. I am the goddess Onya. And this is Manannán mac Lir." And with that, he could see him change form. And there was the young man before him who had stolen his family. And Cormac said, "Greetings to you, Onya and Manannán," and handing back the branch. "I have come this way to hand back the branch. It is not worth the price I've had to pay." And they said, "This is how we got you here. We wanted you to come here. Apologies for tricking you. Your family are well." And with that, a door opened and out came Carbra, Alva and Eithne. And such was the joy of reunion. There were tears and laughter. And then there was a feast. And there was such merriment and music and the best of wine and the best of food. And Anya said, "Tell us, what do you think of Tír na nÓg, King Cormac?" And Cormac said, "Well, I've been intrigued." He said, "I came across these fairy men thatching a roof with white feathers, and then the wind would blow away the feathers, and I couldn't understand what this was about." "Ah," she said, "that is to remind us that those feathers are vanities, not to waste time on them. They're like feathers in the wind." And he said, "But then I saw a young youth, and there he was busy chopping wood and feeding a hungry fire. Ah, that tells us not to waste time on useless pursuits." And then I came to this well. And she said, "And you know what that was about." And with that, she handed him the cup of truth. "This is for you," she said. "Use it wisely. If lies be told 3 times over this cup, it'll be shattered in pieces. But if 3 truths be spoken over the pieces, it will become whole again." And she handed him the branch and said, "This is not just a branch for forgetfulness, it's also a branch of healing. Use it wisely." So that night, Cormac, Eithne, Alva and Carbra had the deepest of sleeps. And when they woke up, they were back on the lawn on Tara. And it is said he continued to rule the island of Ireland with justice and joy and wisdom. And it was a time of abundance during the reign of King Cormac. And they say even today, on a calm summer's evening, if you're in Tara and you listen carefully, you might hear the sound of the bells. So that is the end of my tale, and I hope you have enjoyed it. I suppose this comes to the end of Tea with the Druid for this week. It was absolutely lovely to hear your comments. The idea life will get better brings me joy. Family, the ocean, loving the buzzards overhead, the robin in the hedge. And yes, I can resonate with so many of those. Feeding the local crows and jackdaws. Absolutely beautiful. So I bid you all goodbye. Slán go fóill, go dé sibh slán.